Okay, Mr. President, let's get started. Before we get started, I want to introduce everybody. Chris, would you stand up? Chris Che. Chris is joining the group, runs a small business in Dayton, Ohio, $40 million business, doubled about every 3 years, right, Chris? So he's going to be a great member representing small business. Great to have Chris.
Just keep that going, man.
Join the group. So he's done a great job. So, Mr. President, just to kick it off, we've been busy at work the last 3 months. I think congrats to the team. Really, everybody has come to play. We think the economy's getting better, but there's still volatility. Growth isn't fast enough for any of us. I know you recognize that as well. Jobs are both important, both for the economy, but also for the confidence of the country. The team has really had a very narrow focus on jobs and competitiveness. It is nonpartisan. I think our sense is that the private sector has to drive it, but we need to work with government to facilitate it. And that's really the attitude we've taken. What you're going to hear today is a kind of a market intelligence update from the team, so just give you an update on what's going on in the world. Then Ken's going to outline, we're really doing a sector-by-sector jobs plan that is outcomes-oriented, very focused on results, and really what we want to make sure we're doing is building a sustainable jobs plan. Then you're going to hear a series of presentations that are really focused on supply and demand. How do we get people to work fast? Through training, financing, education, the things that we can move the needle on quickly. We'll talk about a few longer-term ideas like getting 10,000 engineers and doing things on improving the grid, IPOs, things like that. And then at the end, Mr. President, I'll give you an update on the next 90 days, but we plan to keep this thing going. I think there's no one silver bullet on job creation. This is going to be dozens of programs that have metrics and accountability associated with it, and that's really the spirit with which we're taking this. So I'd say everybody here has come to play. We have our challenges, but we're all kind of products of this country. We're all products of the system. We all owe something back to the system, and we're all optimists about the long-term health of the country. So that's where we are so far, and
that's great.
Turn it to you.
Well, listen, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for the seriousness, the diligence that you've displayed already on this Jobs Council. When we formed this, we understood that we had averted the worst possibilities of a Great Depression. We had gotten the economy growing again. We had stabilized the financial system. So we had made great strides from where we had been in 2008, but we understood even though jobs were being created, they were not being created fast enough. I've said this before, I will say it again. I wake up every single morning thinking about how can I make sure that anybody who wants a job is able to get a job. And that's what I think about when I go to bed at night. And I am absolutely confident about America's prospects for the 21st century, but we do have some challenges. And these challenges predated the financial crisis that we had in 2008. If you look at what had happened between 2001 and 2008, job growth was slow even when the economy was growing at a pretty good clip. So we've got a combination of factors, as Jeff said, that come into how do we create jobs. I cannot think of a better group of people to help us tackle it than those who are sitting around the table. A couple of just points that I would make so far. Over the last 15 months, we have seen over 2 million jobs created. And prior to this month, we had seen job growth at a pretty good clip for the previous 3 months. So we had some good reports. This last one showed that job creation has not moved as quickly as we'd like. Now, there are some headwinds that all of us are aware of. High gas prices, I think, had a depressing effect on consumer confidence. It is something that I think was offset to some degree by the payroll tax cut that we initiated in December. That's made a difference in helping families to absorb it, but when you're reminded every single day that your costs are going up, that's going to constrain how you think about spending and investment and so forth. So that's been a challenge. Europe is still uncertain, and what's happening with respect to the situation with Greece, that's something that's created a headwind for some businesses. And I also know that Washington getting its act together and making sure that we've got a credible plan for not simply raising the debt limit, but also medium and long-term deficit reduction is going to be something that's critically important, and we're spending a lot of time focused on. The other thing that we had heard in the last meeting was the question of regulation and regulatory uncertainty. And I took this very much to heart. As I've said before, I'm a big believer that it's important for us to have core regulations that help protect consumers from being taken advantage of, that protect our air and water. I think everybody here around this table recognizes that having a smart regulatory structure can actually enhance market competitiveness. But it's also important to make sure that these regulations are serving a purpose and that the benefits exceed the costs. So what we've done is to initiate a full-scale regulatory review, not just of pending regulations, but actually looking back for the first time at all existing regulations. And I have to tell you, I just did an address on this where I was sitting next to a stack of federal registers where all the regulations exist, and it was a pretty high stack. And it was a reminder that very often Washington passes laws but doesn't do what every business around the table does, which is to look back and see, did what we do in the past still make sense in the current operating environment? Cass Sunstein's been leading this process, and we released an initial report where we've got scores of regulations that we are prepared to eliminate because they no longer apply to current situations. We think it is going to be able to save billions of dollars for businesses just in terms of compliance costs over the next several years. And this is an example of how ideas that were generated from this Job Council we're going to act on. Sometimes we can do it administratively. We don't need legislative cooperation in order to make it happen. Sometimes we are going to need legislation, and where we do, having a group like this that can reach a bipartisan consensus and then push Congress to act, I think can make an extraordinary difference. So overall, we are feeling optimistic about how this council can help drive our agenda over the next 12 to 18 months. I want to thank in particular Penny, who has been doing some great work on skills training and how we get community colleges linked up with businesses more effectively. We had a terrific event just last week with the National Association of Manufacturers. One of the things that I think we're all aware of is that we're going to have to up our game when it comes to how we train people for the jobs that actually exist and design credentialing, training programs, apprenticeship programs, so that people know if they complete this work, they are prepared to work at an Intel or a GE or any of the businesses that are represented around this table. A couple of other things that I'll just mention very quickly. I know that one of the things that people may be wondering about, at least the press who've traveled with me as opposed to the folks who've been down here for the last day, is why are we here at CRE? This is an example of the kind of company that I think all of us want to see being promoted all across the country. This is a company that is specializing in LED lighting, has been extraordinarily effective in driving down the costs of high efficiency lighting that is over time, I think, going to make a huge difference, not just for businesses who use the technology, but also for a country that needs to figure out how do we operate in a more energy efficient way. They've been adding jobs. They have trained their workers. They've got a terrific relationship with the surrounding community as well as the institutions of higher learning in the area. And so this is a good example of entrepreneurship focused on technologies of the future, linking up with training American workers for those jobs. And my understanding is not only are we focused on the domestic market, but we're also focused on the export market and competing internationally, which is going to be extraordinarily important. So, in conclusion, let me just say how appreciative I am of all of you. As soon as this press clears out of the way, we're going to be having a more open conversation. I think, as I understand, Jeff, you guys are going to give me some reports in terms of what the current environment is out there. As Jeff said, ultimately, job growth is going to be driven by the private sector. But we can make some smart decisions to encourage businesses to feel like this is the right time to invest and that America is the right place to invest. And that's what we want to find out from you is what are you hearing out there? What can we do to make sure that we're boosting job growth, not just over the next year, but over the next 20 years? All right?
Thanks, Mr.
Thanks,
President.
Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
We never have this at our meetings, but
Yeah.
we got stuff. So we're going to start with just a couple market intelligence
Yep.
updates. And the first one, we thought it'd be great to hear from Joe Hansen, just an update on how you're seeing the world, Joe, and kind of from the view of labor.
All right, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Mr. President. I look at the work of this council as an effort to look at primarily non-legislative approaches to address the plight of the millions of unemployed and underemployed workers in this country. And I believe we need to play to our country's strengths. And while this will not be as sexy as some of the things you're going to hear today, one of our country's strengths is agriculture, and it's directly employing over 2 million Americans. And when you add related processing, distribution, and retail jobs, that job number grows to almost 4 million. My union, the UFCW, represents over 300,000 workers in food manufacturing, mainly in the meat and poultry processing. The U.S. meat and poultry industry directly employs 1.8 million people and pays $45.5 billion in wages and benefits. An estimated 580,000 people have jobs in distribution of meat and poultry products, and 1.25 million more retail jobs depend on the sale of meat and poultry products to the public. So the meat and poultry industry is a growing industry with growing employment. But exports are a significant and increasingly important driver of this job growth. For every $1 billion in beef exports, over 12,000 jobs are created. For every $1 billion in pork exports, over 13,000 jobs are created. And for every $1 billion in poultry exports, over 11,000 jobs are created. Industry economists believe that a focused governmental effort to address barriers to United States meat exports in Asian countries has the potential to add thousands and thousands of jobs in the U.S. Secretary Vilsack and Ambassador Kirk have done important work in this area, and we have already begun to see results. China has started to recognize that it is in their self-interest to address their domestic food situation by cracking open their import door to U.S. meat. As a result, food exports to China are growing strongly. Right now, we have additional opportunities with Russia. Since Russia is looking to join the World Trading Organization, it is important to get their commitment to drop their various schemes to block U.S. meat imports. I know Ambassador Kirk and his team are well aware of these issues, but I wanted to take this opportunity to stress the impact these issues have on U.S. jobs. I also wanted to take this opportunity to stress another issue along with the meat export issue, and it's the importance of traditional defined benefit pensions in the economic health of this country. Virtually all economists agree that the U.S. economy needs to be rebalanced. We need more national saving, investment, and new business formation, and we need less debt-fueled consumption. The continuance of defined benefit pension plans needs to be part of that rebalancing. In 2007, public and private defined benefit pension plans had nearly $9 trillion in assets, and in the aggregate, these plans were almost fully funded. Obviously, the downturn in financial markets reduced many of the plans' funding, but there is a consensus among labor and employers that there is a need for relief. Not to change the requirement for fully funding pensions, but to extend the time frame for achieving such funding. Defined benefit plans have made significant investments in the infrastructure in support of job generation in the U.S. We cannot afford to lose this source of funds which help create jobs. I think a well-thought-out program of federal government guarantees and other financial incentives directed at pension investors could encourage such plans to invest even greater allocations to rebuilding America's infrastructure. We hope that the administration and Congress can work to achieve these goals. And finally, Mr. President, I want to thank you for keeping America's unemployed at the top of your administration's priorities. I look forward to continue working with the committee to help you to continue to create job opportunities for American workers. Thank you.
Great, Joe. Thanks.
Let me just make two quick comments. First of all, the point Joe makes about exports from the agricultural sector. I mean, this is an area where we traditionally run a big surplus, and we've got to continue to build on that surplus. And you're absolutely right that the Korea Free Trade Agreement, Colombia, Panama, the 3 free trade agreements that we're putting forward actually emphasize opening up these markets when it comes to agricultural products, and I think that can make a significant difference. So that's point number one. And with respect to Russia, we're very mindful, and we have at least the appearance of getting resolved. The issue of poultry going into Russia, there's been some back and forth, I know, on some of the details of it, but we know that this is something that can make a very big difference. Second point you make, we're going to be working closely with Congress around the whole issue of pensions, and there are a lot of the companies represented around this table probably are also concerned about how that ends up being resolved and handled, and we know that this is something that we're going to have to work with everybody on, labor and business, to make sure that we get a smart resolution to that.
Great. Gary sees millions of consumers every day. Gary, how are you seeing it?
Well, thanks, Jeff, and it's a pleasure to be here, Mr. President, and thank you so much for your leadership during really tough times. What I thought I'd do, Jeff, is maybe talk a little bit about the industry and then Southwest more specifically, because I think there are some differences. I think we all know how important transportation is to the economy, how important aviation is to the economy. If you look at the domestic air travel over the last decade, there are fewer jobs, fewer flights, fewer passengers, fewer airplanes. All the way around, the domestic airline industry has shrunk. And there are theories as to why that is. I think one very clear reason is because costs are so much higher. That's including fuel, of course, but also taxes and the burden of regulation. There is a different story at Southwest Airlines, and I think it helps illustrate that point. We've actually been able to grow Southwest over the past decade by almost double, and it's because we have remarkably lower cost, and we've been able to offer much lower fares and continue to see a very significant shift within the domestic industry away from our competition. Current trends are much better than they were, but we're celebrating our 40th anniversary, by the way, on Saturday. This is the slowest growing period that we've experienced in our history because we're dealing with much higher gas prices, as you mentioned, Mr. President. So the benefit is very clear of having lower cost. It's something that's passed directly through to consumers. Every new market that we go into where we are able to lower fares, we see an exponential growth in travel. Right now the trends are improving with business travel. We're a lagging indicator in the economic cycle. We're the last to see softness. We're the last to see some improvement. So it is very encouraging to see that business travel is returning. The domestic industry overall, business travel is still below pre-recession levels. At Southwest, I think we have recovered and are in an expansionary mode right now. The consumer has been a bright spot for us, and again, it ties in very closely with our low fares and our low fare brand. With respect to jobs, we are growing this year. We're growing at about a 5% clip. The way our business works, it's a pretty long lead time to put orders in with the Boeing company. We're an all Boeing airline with all GE engines on them, which are the best in the world, by the way. But orders today would probably be delivered in 2013. to offer a perspective. I don't know what gas prices will be then. I don't know what the economy will be like. We don't know what the tax burdens will be, the regulatory environment. So we want to grow. We want to buy airplanes, buy more engines, create more jobs, but right now we're just not generating sufficient profits in order to make those kinds of investments. I think there's a couple of things that we're recommending to the Jobs Council that we focus on. We must have a modernized air traffic control system. My best estimate is that it costs us 15% in terms of additional fuel consumption, which is obviously not climate friendly either. We do not fly our airplanes as the crow flies. We route them according to 1930s waypoints that are established on the ground with ground-based radar systems. So it is horribly out of date and very expensive to continue to maintain. The other thing, of course, is the continued development of alternative fuels. There's a lot of focus on that. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be many years away before they're commercially viable to have a real impact, but it's something that I think we must continue to invest in. Something that's, I think, closer is the continued development of aerospace technology. GE has a new engine that Jeff can certainly speak to, but we're hoping that it becomes commercially available over the next several years. It alone could reduce fuel consumption by 15% plus or minus. So we're looking at the Boeing company to make commitments to this next generation airplane, take advantage of new generation engines, and but that too could be many years away before we see that. In the meantime, we're hopeful that we'll continue to see supportive policy so that there aren't additional regulatory and tax burdens like a carbon tax, for example. The best way for us to participate in climate is to seek a new air traffic control system that's more fuel efficient, as well as new aviation technology that would be more fuel efficient.
Gary, let me just ask you, first of all, I hope everybody, because I know this is being live streamed, and also we got some press back there. I just want to emphasize what Gary just said. 15% potential fuel savings in the industry as a whole if we just got a more efficient air traffic control system in place. So this is an example of the kind of smart investment where we will recoup our money as consumers and as taxpayers. But we've got to get started because we've been talking about this now for
30 years.
30 years. We have an outdated system, and it is causing not only you guys to pay more for gas or fuel, but it also is a huge contributor to the delays that make people irritated at airports. I mean, I understand TSA may have something to do with it as well, but so this is an example of a smart investment. And as we are moving forward, knowing we've got to reduce our deficit, knowing we've got to get a handle on our debt, distinguishing between smart investments and dumb investments, smart spending and bad spending, is absolutely critical. And a lot of times that is not how these things are couched in the public debates. And so I just want to highlight that. With respect to, you mentioned carbon tax specifically, Gary, are there other things that on the regulatory side or on the tax side that stand out, or is it just generally, businesses get frustrated with taxes and regulation?
Well, and first of all, we certainly applaud your leadership to not only scrutinize new regulations, but to look at the regulations that we have on the books. We do chuckle in the airlines because we were supposedly deregulated in 1978, but I don't think that that's really been the case. So it's, I would say the things to look at would be regulatory burdens that truly don't add to safety, or to the customer experience. And there are a host of those that we could recommend. And we have new regulatory burdens coming online now that are requiring, is a very quick example, us to completely rewire our systems as to how we display airfares. And in this particular case, it's inconsistent with the way virtually every other product or service is advertised or sold. And it causes one to ask, well, what is the purpose? What
So
does it add?
presumably the rationale is making sure increased transparency for consumers in terms
Yes,
of
sir.
what they're paying.
Yes, sir.
Well, what we'll do is we'll follow up with Ray LaHood, and let's find out. Let's take a look at that list and see what makes sense.
Good. Let's get an update on small business, Monica.
Sure, thank you, Jeff, and Mr. President, it's great to be here. And I would say that for the first time in the past few years, we are seeing real optimism in the small business sector. And it's demonstrated tangibly in two very direct ways. One, in small business formation. Small business formation is actually up. And of course, we lost almost 150,000 businesses themselves, small businesses, between 2007 and 2009. 2010, for the very first time, we actually saw small business growth. And that's important because these are small entrepreneurs. They're putting themselves on the line, their family's income on the line, and they were actually seeing this vital segment of the economy coming back into play. So small business formation is up. More importantly, I think, is the optimism that you see among small business entrepreneurs. Every indicator shows that people feel much more optimistic. They're enthusiastic. They see signs of recovery. They're looking at this year and the next 12 months as years of tremendous growth. And so those two factors combined, small business formation with a sense of great optimism, I think for the first time is really fueling a sense that we have come out of the dip. And I would say that businesses are now much more confident that they're going to grow and are compelled to invest in that growth. And I would just say, excuse me, as an operator, as an owner of a medium-sized consumer-facing company, we see it in a number of the indicators that we track ourselves. So our advertiser base is comprised of close to 10,000 small businesses located typically in urban environments. What we're seeing, 2009 to 2010, we saw a 12% decline in small businesses, the number of advertisers that we had during that one period of years. What we're seeing in 2011 is not just a recovery where we have actually seen growth, but this is the area that is actually stimulating the greatest revenue growth for us. So these are small businesses that are operating on the ground, mom and pops, transportation, hospitality, retailers. The fact that they're back in the market, advertising and marketing themselves also demonstrates to me that they're ready to get back in business and are actually prepared to act on that optimism that we saw. Of course, you mentioned gas prices, concern around consumer confidence, but at least for now we're seeing, as I said, business formation and optimism around this sector. But demand for investment by small businesses, you've been out of the market, you've retrenched, you've restructured, you've downsized, it's time to grow again. And people want to act on that optimism and get back in. And unfortunately, we're still seeing a climate where capital is just not available to small businesses. This is probably the number one concern. So you see all of this enthusiasm, and yet only about half of all small businesses say that they have the necessary financial resources to successfully execute on their plans. Loan demand is up. But unfortunately, banks have denied almost 60% of all loan applications, and of course we understand why. They take a look back, your cash flows, your top-line revenue growth, and because these past few years have been so difficult, we're seeing, as I said, almost 60% of all bank loans to small businesses had been denied. Angel investors are back in the market, but they've only backed about 4% of all the business plans that they see. And venture capital and private equity is only funding about 1% of all the business plans that they see. And of course, the head of the SBA is with us, and they've just revealed that bank loans outstanding to small businesses actually declined in this last year. So this is the counterpart. You've got great optimism, you've got interest in growth and investment, people want to invest in technology, new product designs, new marketing strategies, and access to capital continues to be the greatest concern. Having said that, I would also say that the focus by this council on the small business sector is actually very gratifying. And as opposed to having a standalone set of initiatives around small business, the leadership of the council and all of the work groups are actually looking at very specific ways in which we compare large companies with small companies. We're developing a mentoring program focused on exports because we know that actually small businesses are the greatest number of exporting and producing businesses in the country, and then certainly evaluating the regulatory burdens. So I would say overall, for the first time, and I as a small business owner, a medium-sized business owner, feeling very optimistic about the prospects, want to get back into business and want to grow our businesses. Still lots of concern about access to capital. And I think the work that we're doing here about removing barriers, eliminating regulations, focusing on exports and high growth, we'll be able to see real success, I think, in the next 12 months.
And with respect to capital, we have had sort of an ongoing series of conversations among cabinet members and those who are on the economic side of our work, looking at what the continuing barriers to getting capital are for small businesses. Obviously, Karen's been leading the charge on this. Part of what makes this a challenge is we've got a lot of independent regulatory agencies with oversight in the banks. Having a conversation with them that doesn't tip over the line and encroach on their independence. But those who are in the financial sector and the banking sectors, I'll be interested in hearing from you guys what you're seeing. A lot of small businesses rely on smaller banks to access their capital, and I think community banks, I've been getting a lot of reports, are still having trouble, partly because they were overinvested in real estate that is still very weak. But part of it may be that there's been an overcompensation when there was overexuberance pre-financial crisis. Now people have pulled back and haven't been willing to loosen up enough to capture the enthusiasm that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I would just say banks are lending, so you see greater commercial loans, you see industrial loans. What you're not seeing is small business lending, and,
Right.
and certainly the SBA-backed loans are there. Small businesses can't access the capital markets, so this
Right.
continues to be the most important issue.
Right.
Thank you.
This is a place we're going to stay focused on in terms of where the council goes in the next 90 days, because we hear it consistently enough.
Good.
Maybe, Roger, you wrap us up with a look at the markets?
Sure. Obviously, the markets are reflecting exactly what you already understand, which is that the economy continues to grow, but there's some volatility for sure. And I would say the markets are also clearly focused in not just domestically but internationally, because they're international capital markets these days. So the earlier point that you made about uncertainty around Europe is absolutely playing through the markets for sure, no question. I would also say the markets are waiting for something that is going on in Washington, which is to understand how the debt and deficit talks unfold. At this stage, I would say things are relatively quiescent, but obviously as we get closer to that August 2nd date that the Secretary of the Treasury has put out there, markets are going to become much more focused in. And my expectation is that there'll have to be a lot of activity much before that point, as you well understand, because of the limited amount of time when Congress is in session. So at this stage, I'd say markets are, roughly speaking, supportive of growth. They're reflective of the ups and downs and the volatility, and always being forward-looking. Two big questions: how things unfold in the global economy, and how things unfold here domestically. If I could add one other thing, because as you know, I represent or work with a number of individuals in their savings, and we're clearly seeing, as I said to you the last time, in our phone calls and others, folks at the lower end of the spectrum are still looking to tap into their savings in various different ways. those who have jobs are feeling moderately more confident, if I can sort of impute some psychological outcomes to some of the calls that we're getting. So that's a very interesting, ongoing dynamic in the U.S. economy.
Well, the point about deficit and debt and how this gets resolved relative to the debt limit obviously is going to be consuming over the next several weeks. The thing I want to emphasize is that we need to solve our medium and long-term debt and deficit problems, not for abstract reasons, but because they are a concrete impediment to growth and jobs. So, the American people need to know that over the next month, as we focus on making sure that we have a balanced, thoughtful resolution to this problem, this isn't to the exclusion of worrying about jobs, but is actually in service of making sure that businesses have enough confidence about the investment environment that they can start getting off the sidelines and putting more money to work and hiring more people and building more plants and building more equipment. One thing that I do think is important is making sure that we are keeping our eye on the need to accelerate the recovery as part of the overall package that we agreed to. I've long believed that coming out of as bad of a recession as we've been in, that it's important for us to focus on what are the real drivers of our debt and deficit problems. And that's not the day-to-day spending. It's the structural problems that we have between sending too much money out and not bringing enough money in. And the steps that we take don't have to create a sudden drastic cliff in 2012 or 2013 while the economy is still recovering. We've got a 10-year time horizon and a 20-year time horizon that we can operate off of, and I think that can that gives us a little bit of room to continue to do some smart things like the payroll tax cut that we initiated in December, while still keeping our eye on the ball in terms of the long term.
So we're gonna shift gears now.
Let's do that.
Talk about the jobs plan and some of the activities of the council, and maybe Ken is going to start off just to give you an over-the-top sense of a jobs plan that we're putting together as a council.
Good. Thank you, Mr. President, for your sense of focus and urgency on job creation. And we also know that this goal has to be integrated with the overall objective of growing our economy. So the assignment for this working group has been to produce a jobs plan and really a framework for all of the work across the Jobs Council. And I think we have had excellent collaboration across the council on this. We obviously want to bring a sense of urgency to this challenge, but we want to do it in a way that's both focused and comprehensive. And so what I thought I would do is just go through some of the principles that we're following on the council. The first is we want to look at everything through the lens of job creation. We want to look at every proposal we consider through the lens of job creation. If we do this, what will the impact be on job creation? How quickly will it have an impact? What are the actions or resources necessary to implement the proposal? And as a result, we've done a bottoms-up analysis and attempted to quantify the job creation opportunities by sector and industry and identify the job growth potential of each proposal. Second, we've got to take a comprehensive approach. And we're not focused exclusively on any particular sector or income group or geographic region. Instead, we want to move down a number of tracks, at the same time exploring multiple proposals for potential job creation. Now, we looked at this potential in different ways across multiple axes. For example, across individual sectors and industries of the economy, what is the potential for job creation? What are the problems facing different sectors of the economy? We also looked across different regions of the country. What are the areas that have the highest unemployment, and what skills are needed for the jobs of the future? And third, we wanted to consider the needs and opportunities across different income segments. We really want to create jobs across all income levels. Finally, and we think this is very important, we want to focus on outcomes. This is really core. 1 million jobs within 2 years. And we believe we need a relentless focus on execution. Now, as we put together the jobs plan, we began by focusing on high priority segments with the potential for immediate job growth. And what we wanted to do was define what I would call low-hanging fruit areas where the private sector or the executive branch or both could accelerate short-term job creation without the need for major legislation from Congress or actions that would require a long runway. Now, you're going to hear some of these ideas today from my colleagues on the council, but you'll also hear ideas that impact the moderate to long-term job creation as well. However, given the sense of urgency, we wanted to have a significant short-term goal. So we assembled a list of proposals that could create 1 million jobs over the next 2 years. And we believe by taking a series of actions across 1 million jobs, that it could end up being, as I would call it, a significant down payment on job creation over a longer horizon. So let me just give you 2 examples. Travel and tourism is a growing sector globally, but the United States is losing market share and has been for years. We believe that the executive branch in business must accelerate a range of initiatives, from speeding the process of getting a visa to strengthening promotion programs in order to once again make the United States a leading destination for the international traveler. This will position the travel industry for further growth and create hundreds of thousands of jobs in the U.S. There are also other important examples, some of which you'll hear about today, where the private sector can take the initiative without any action by the federal government, especially in the area of training. And Penny Pritzker and her team have been working on that, working with colleges and various vocational schools. Employers around this table are moving ahead on a range of programs that will train more workers who can fill jobs in manufacturing and create a new generation of healthcare professionals. Now, this will not only equip our workers for today's jobs, it will strengthen and make us more competitive in the global marketplace. I think, as Jeff said, there is not one silver bullet to accomplish this job creation goal. Many actions are required in the coming months, and we will continue to look at a broad range of ideas, some of which we hope will be big ideas. I think that we're approaching the challenge of job creation across multiple timeframes, and we recognize that our report today is only a beginning. The approach we're taking is to focus on the short, the moderate, and the long term, as we believe this is the best way to create jobs in a sustainable way. Ultimately, we believe we must take fundamental steps to build and ensure that this country is more competitive in the global marketplace, and that we have a long-term strategy for sustainable job creation in the United States.
So far, we've got probably 30 ideas the council's working on. Ken and some of the rest of the team is presenting at places like the Business Roundtable, NAM, places like that. So we're reaching out to all of our business colleagues to get everybody in the game. And that's the way, I think the only way we can approach this is step by step, multiple ideas across multiple segments, and we're going to leave behind a full-out jobs plan.
Right.
So a couple of the ideas, Steve was going to kick off and talk about really one of the financing streams and how it can work for small business.
Jeff, about a month ago, decided to create a new committee of this group focused on high growth entrepreneurship. And the reason it's so important is while small business really is the foundation on which we built America, it's these high growth companies that create all the jobs. the Kauffman Foundation research suggests 40 million jobs have been created over the last 25 years from high growth companies, and they account for all the net job growth. So if we want to get this nation moving, want to get unemployment down, want to get the economy moving, want to ensure national competitiveness, getting entrepreneurship right is critical. It really is the secret sauce that's built America. The companies like GE or IBM, it's now celebrating its 100th anniversary, were really started by entrepreneurs. This was a nation built by entrepreneurs, and cities like Durham were built by entrepreneurs. We really got to get it right. Unfortunately, we have some challenges. I woke up this morning and read the USA Today. On the front page, it says weakest startup since early 1990s. So there's work to be done to get this back on track with your leadership and Jeff's leadership. There's 4 particular initiatives I wanted to give you a quick update on. The first is this new committee of the Jobs Council is working on a roadmap for entrepreneurship. We're working with McKinsey, and we've talked to dozens of groups and assembling all the best ideas from inside the administration, from Congress, from business groups, from other groups, and trying to gather them all together, run some analytics against them in terms of where the real leverage is, and come back at the next meeting with really a roadmap, a specific prescription to get this moving again, and hope to build bipartisan support for a plan that would be 6, 7, 8 items. So that's number one. The second, tomorrow, under the leadership of Secretary Locke, the National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship is meeting, and they'll be discussing a report with 8 items that focus on access to capital, some early stage capital, some late stage capital. I think some important work's been done with that group. The third, the Startup America initiative that you helped us launch about 4 months ago, is off to a good start with corporate commitments to give entrepreneurs great resources, as well as focusing on building up regional ecosystems. You'll be pleased to know, even though I still think you should think about Hawaii as your home. We did launch Startup Illinois a few weeks ago, and there are many of these other regional efforts that are being developed. And finally, as part of the jobs plan, with the leadership of Karen Mills at the SBA, over the last 3 months, there have been 8 roundtables, reducing barriers roundtables all around the country. 230 different suggestions were made in terms of streamlining access to SBA resources, loans, and so forth. So we're working with the SBA to try to put a specific plan in place to essentially get people access to these resources that already exist, but they don't necessarily know how to navigate through a complicated system to do that. So the combination of this jobs plan, really, I think, a roadmap for entrepreneurship, the access to capital work NACY's done, the early efforts of Startup America, which seem to be building some momentum, and looking at ways to streamline the SBA. I think we can get this back on track, as Jeff said, and Ken and others. There's no quick fixes here. It's going to take a lot of work over a sustained period of time, but I think focusing on entrepreneurs and celebrating them as American heroes, and looking at ways to reduce barriers and to really get more people to start up companies, more people to ramp up companies, in particular unleashing these high growth speed ups is very important for the nation, and we appreciate your leadership.
Penny has an update on getting construction workers back to work.
Thank you, Jeff. Mr. President, in February, you asked the Council to help lead the Better Buildings Initiative. And the Better Buildings Initiative's goal is to save American businesses $40 billion a year on energy bills by employing new technologies and adopting energy renovations in America's buildings. So we support this effort not only because of its role in reducing our energy independence, but also because this initiative is estimated to create 114,000 new jobs over the next 2 years. That figure comes from an independent study by the Political Economy Research Institute of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And the BBI job creation can begin today. In addition to new jobs, BBI and the Council are promoting steps that will support the market with better information and less paperwork. And it can affect what a building is worth. Energy performance is often not a factor in real estate appraisals today because of lack of information, awareness, and transparency. So today, that's changing. The Department of Energy and the Appraisal Foundation are launching a collaboration to educate appraisers. This effort will make sure that appraisers across the country have the required information and guidelines to make energy performance a recognized part of appraisals. We're also proposing to make the existing business tax deduction for energy efficiency work better. Businesses today have told us that it costs more to document the current deduction than it's worth. And so today the Department of Energy launched a new online tool that makes it simpler to use the deduction without compromising quality. So the right incentives and an efficient market will make American business more efficient and more competitive. Next, the community colleges are going to help meet the need for building industry professionals who can support clean energy technologies and renovations. On October 15th, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, working with the Department of Energy, will announce $1.5 million in competitive grants for community colleges to train workers. And this will fulfill your commitment to launch a new commercial building technology extension partnership. So we're building momentum in the Better Buildings Initiative. We want to realize the full promise of the 114,000 new jobs. And lastly, we're working with former President Bill Clinton on the Better Buildings Challenge, which is an effort to build public-private partnerships to create private sector energy leadership. The Better Buildings Challenge is where building owners will commit to upgrade the energy performance in all types of buildings, whether it be office buildings, schools, hospitals. This effort can not only cut costs over time, but also create jobs today. So we have a lot of momentum behind this. The administration in various departments has done really terrific work, and we're very excited about this.
Yeah, I think the potential on this is enormous. And it's something I've been discussing with my team and trying to figure out how to structure all these various components over the last couple of years. We know that this is our low-hanging fruit when it comes to energy efficiency, environmental quality, climate change, job creation, and the question is just how do we get all the pieces fitting together? Penny helped educate me on, for example, even if a building owner knows that they're going to get their money back for making these investments, if you've got complications between the lessor and the lessee, then the person who's initially putting in Cree lights may not recoup their money, and so as a consequence, their attitude is, well, we'll put the low efficiency lighting in initially, and we'll let whoever comes in after us to change the lighting if they want. But of course, the problem is potentially LED lighting, for example, could last for 10 years. And so if you could figure out a way to build that in from the start, then everybody wins. But the incentives right now are skewed across various aspects of the real estate market. And so the work that's being done on this, I think, has enormous potential for job creation, even as it helps us become more energy efficient. I'm very excited by it.
It's low-hanging fruit. It could be privately financed. We'll stick on it to get it done.
And there's enormous enthusiasm in the building owners.
Good.
So next is Matt. Matt's been working on regulatory permitting, streamlining permitting cycle time, and all the things are near and dear to big and small business.
Mr. President, 2 of the 6 focus areas, regulatory and infrastructure, have a common intersection, and that's around project permitting. Over the past 60 days, we've held numerous listening sessions with people from the business community, the environmental community, and a number of others as well. I want to share with you some of the thoughts that we've come up with thus far around some recommendations as well. My railroad, BNSF, announced this year record capital spending, and a large part of that capital will go to building new projects, and some of it will go to buy new locomotives, but let's just stay on the building stuff to begin with. We see firsthand what happens when you try and permit a project in this country, and it can delay things from months to years, and in many cases, it can cause the project to be abandoned. I'm sure that when you implemented the Recovery Act, your staff briefed you on many of the challenges of the permitting process and the impact on putting Americans back to work. And that's exactly what we see in American business as well.
Shovel-ready was not as shovel-ready as we expected.
So many others have found the place that we're in today and have tried to do things over the years. Specific legislation was passed in the next highway bill that really went quite far to help this process. specific states, the state of Minnesota has passed a specific law to help the permitting process, in this case, permitting a new steel factory, a new steel plant. We've heard testimony from experts who have been studying this among other developed countries, not just China. We always hear the story, oh, China can do this in 60 days. This is benchmarking among developed countries, and there's some very constructive best practices that our country can learn from countries such as Australia and our neighbors to the north, Canada, and we want to understand those better, and we will be doing that. Let me assure you from the outset, though, this is not at all about eliminating the review process. It's really about speeding up the process, and we think it can have significant impact to jobs. I've got 5 recommendations, but before I start with those 5, let me just spend a minute on NEPA, because you hear a lot about NEPA, and we all of us who are involved in the building trades understand that NEPA really, in my opinion, needs to be reformed. It's a process statute, not a decision statute. And in essence, what's happening is that projects get pocket vetoed through delay. You'll hear that only about 3% of the projects face the full EIS, but that comprises about 70% of the dollar value of the federal projects, and those EISs can take 3 to 5 years. And AASHTO tells us that a project can take from planning to implementation 10 to 15 years. Now, again, I know that we're not China, but I think we can do better than that. And so we've got five areas of focus that I'd like to recommend to you. First, we don't, as a country, even know how many projects are in the federal pipelines, much less where they sit. And we would like to ask you to require all the agencies to collect and consolidate the permitting data from all the federal agencies and make that information transparent and available. Federal agencies should ensure that reviews are completed in a timely manner and that the public has visibility in the progress of a permit. Right now, that is just unknown totally. Second, there are high priority projects that can have a significant impact to job creation, and those projects ought to be given top priority for those reviewed. Third, we need accountability for job creating projects, which means monitoring and controls by somebody whose entire mission it is economic development. This means empowering executive offices not only to coordinate, but if necessary to make the final decisions under the deadlines that the administration sets for decision. In essence, we want the White House to play the role of quarterback where necessary. There's a couple of other challenges that you're going to need a little bit of help from your friends in Congress, but these are really important. Fourth issue is really that many state processes can be at least as stringent as the federal processes, and those should be allowed to satisfy the federal processes. Projects should not be subject to duplicate state and federal reviews where states are in a better position to consider the project and are committed to devoting the resources. And then fifth, finally, permit litigation is one of the biggest levers against project construction. Stakeholders should certainly have their day in court, but the opportunity to challenge projects must be shortened. I clearly get that the politics of all this is very, very difficult, but I also know that you have a desire to improve both the environment as well as your commitment to economic growth, and I think that you're uniquely situated to bridge these two issues. I really do believe that, and I think if you ask everybody in this room, if we adopted these 5 recommendations, that you would see a significant impact to job creation, American competitiveness, and something else you speak about a lot. It's just good government. That's it.
Well, look, I think that's a terrific presentation. Let me just make a comment. Maybe this was in some briefing materials that you guys had prepared, or maybe I just read it somewhere else. I think we've been rated 27th at this point in the speed of actually being able to construct something. Now, that's not very good. And as you point out, I think there's a way for us to maintain our environmental standards, make sure that communities that are being affected by construction have a voice, but not just have layer upon layer of bureaucracy that is slowing projects up. Now, somebody told me, I think it may have been Steve Jobs at Microsoft, where in China you could start the you could start building the factory, and they would allow people to start working in it while the upper floors were still being constructed. We're probably not going to do that, but I think that the recommendations that you put out are ones that we should take very seriously. One of the bigger challenges obviously has to do with coordination between various state, local, and federal jurisdictions. That's actually the thing that I'm most concerned about, because it's not something that I have direct control over. If there's construction involving a federal project on federal lands, then potentially we can cut through red tape to make decisions quickly. But the smart grid is a classic example. At the beginning of this recession, when I first came in, one of the projects we wanted to move rapidly on was the issue of smart grid. And I was rapidly informed that the problem wasn't actually capital, that we could actually get private financing for most of the smart grid. The problem was this patchwork of local jurisdictions and NIMBY and all the typical problems in terms of siting. And so one of the questions you offered in your list, one solution, which is federal deferral to states in some circumstances. That may in some circumstances be appropriate, but my instinct is that what we're going to have to figure out is, can we get a state, federal, local agreement, almost like the Unified Commercial Code or something, where everybody buys into a particular model approach, a particular standard that a lot of different states apply, that the federal government applies, so that people aren't having to guess how to approach these problems depending on which jurisdiction they're in. But I'm very excited about this. We're going to get on it.
Lots of jobs here. Paul's got an update. Paul's been and is leading a team to get us more engineers in the country every year, which is an important aspect as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Mr. President, our committee is looking at the significantly increasing the availability of qualified engineers and technicians in the workforce. And the reason for this is self-evident. Obviously, for a knowledge-based economy and an innovative economy, you need these people. But also near term, there are 5 times as many openings as there are qualified people in this country for these. So this is a near-term way to really start filling the job pipeline. Longer term, if we don't solve this, those jobs aren't going to be here. We all understand that. So in going through this, our committee came up with 3 focus areas. And I'll talk about the first 2, and Darlene will talk about the third. First one is on immigration. And I think you're well aware that if you look at the graduate degree programs in the United States, masters and PhDs in STEM, about 50% of those people are not U.S.-born citizens, and they don't have the right to work here when they graduate. In fact, at Columbia, a school that I think you're familiar with, the graduating school class this year was 85% were foreign-born, right, so of the PhD in engineering. So we came up with a couple of ideas in this area that are focused on short-term and long-term deliverables. Short-term, the criteria was, what can the administration do through regulation or just changes in administrative policies without Congress? And we've submitted a dozen ideas to the White House staff in this area. They have to do with early filing of green cards, premium processing, regenerating the national interest waiver, those kinds of things. And I think there seems to be very good receptivity to this, and I saw some of them showed up in your speech in the Southwest when you made that. In the long term, of course, Congress has to pass some legislation here. We're buoyed by the fact that Jeff Flake has a nice bill on stapling a green card to every PhD in STEM. Zoe Lofgren is working on increasing the total number, and Lamar Smith is focusing on changing the per country limits so that we can allow for the importation or accreditation of mostly Chinese and Indian engineers, as opposed to waiting for the rare Finnish engineer that wants to work here. And those all look very good. The impact on jobs is big. Every one of these people that we can bring into the workforce because of their skill set, their ability to create companies, to create patents and so forth, generates 5 jobs around them. So for every one of these, we get 5. And this is a big deal. So that was immigration. Any comments on that?
I'm with you. But I want to emphasize the point you made, because sometimes this gets posed as immigrants taking jobs. If we have an immigrant engineer who's coming here and starting a company, that's creating jobs. If we have an immigrant engineer that is providing a skill that is in short supply, and as a consequence a business decides to locate here as opposed to in India or in China, that's creating jobs. So obviously my biggest priority, which I'm assuming is going to be next on the list, is making sure that all our kids start studying engineering. Because there's nothing we used to have the best engineers and the most engineers, and there's nothing inherent in our kids studying math and science and getting advanced degrees in engineering. So the whole STEM education agenda is one that we've really got to ramp up. And so I don't want to steal your thunder. I'm assuming you're going to talk about that.
That's next year. A perfect straight man, sir.
That's my goal.
So as you're aware, only 14% of our undergraduates are enrolled in STEM programs. Worse than that, though, of the 14%, 40% drop out in the first year, and 60% in the underrepresented groups. So these are kids that got the jazz in high school, were qualified to get into engineering degrees or STEM programs, and we lose 40% of them in the first year. So we decided to look at why. And it turns out there's a number of schools in this country that have a very good retention rate. Michigan, for example, retains 98% of the freshmen that start in engineering and get them a degree. They have a program that looks at a number of things. They have high-touch mentorship, they have an internship program, and they have a jobs reach-out program. So we're going to steal that. We're going to steal that and expand it to it. We're recruiting a number of schools that have similar kinds of problems, but not the solution that Michigan does. And this is mostly private sector focused. We do have one action item that we're going to ask you about, but we want to have a direct engineering engagement, the mentorship program. We want to companies around the table and generally in technology to commit to first and second year internships so that people can see how exciting hands-on engineering is. And then third, somehow recognize the schools that do this, or some kinds of schools of distinction or technical seal of excellence program where we recognize schools that get their graduation rates up in these programs with some kind of presidential recognition and maybe something at the White House at some point in time. This will take some money. We think we can do it with private money. The corporations that we've talked to are willing to chip in and commit to internships, to jobs, and maybe even some seed money to feed the high-touch mentorship that has to happen in the first year. And our goal is there's 120,000 graduates per year in engineering today. We think we can lift that by 10,000 a year per year over the next several years. That's not enough. We have a 5x deficit, so we have to more than triple the number of graduates over the next 10 years to come anywhere close to doing this, even if we fix immigration.
My working assumption, though, Paul, is that if we can get the snowball rolling, then it can build exponentially. Now, part of this is going to be changing our culture and me using the bully pulpit to talk about why this is so important. The number of young people who, during the 90s and the last decade, went into high finance, who could have profitably gone into engineering, is in part because that was what was focused on, that was what was considered sexy as an occupation. And I want that whole pocket protector to be sort of the new sex appeal. And we've seen this happen before. I mean, this is what the space program did. A whole generation of young people got attached to the idea of making stuff and creating new technologies. Was the most noble of endeavors, and we've got to get back to that. So all the ideas that you're talking about, we want to fully support. Figuring out how we can build a movement behind this, I think it would be really important. Make this as high profile as possible.
Great. And then the third one Darlene is going to talk about, which is advanced manufacturing.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to really applaud you on your new initiatives for the Skills for America, especially the industry recognized credentials. I think that's going to be really successful in helping develop the manufacturing sector. Which really ties in nicely to what I think is a good solution is a pilot program to expand advanced manufacturing workforce. The problem as I see it today is U.S. manufacturers are encountering difficulties hiring technicians, skilled trade workers, IT, and individuals with sufficient technical training to work in these advanced manufacturing positions. Polling currently indicates 14 to 52% of prospective employers, particularly small businesses, are really concerned about the lack of skilled job candidates to fill the specialized manufacturing slots that require a degree of training. And small businesses really have no incentive to risk bringing on people that don't come in as value added, or to put their high-tech manufacturing equipment into the hands of unskilled people. Small businesses, as we know, are the country's engine room for job growth. 30 million small businesses account for 64% of the net new jobs, and small businesses created 70% of the jobs in the last 10 years. So a solution? We urge the creation of a nationwide jobs training pilot program geared towards advanced manufacturing. And this proposal would include 2 8-week training sessions with a private-public partnership involving companies that seek employees with these skills and knowledge. Skills that include computer numeric controls, foundations of technical math, computer-aided machining and design, CNC machining, and manufacturing processes and other similar aptitudes. The key to this program is that the employers would help coordinate the actual programs so that it would be fitting for the jobs that are currently out there. Halfway through this coursework, we would have these students intern at our respective companies in available positions. The fabricated metal industry is an industry sector composed of 60,000 establishments, which includes 2,600 companies in the high-tech precision machining arena, of which the Precision Machine Products Association is a part of and would be the targeted employers. The Dunwoody College of Technology is a nonprofit technical institute of higher learning that is preparing a course of study for this pilot. This college has the equipment, which is the very expensive capital equipment, to help train these people. And that is what we have found has been a real issue. The costs of capital equipment at a lot of the schools prevent the real training that we really need. The pilot concept would need to be spread to other colleges, since Dunwoody is only one of 3 nationwide private schools that actually have advanced manufacturing skills for workers. Over the longer term, we'd urge consideration of training of an advanced manufacturing workforce being added as a depreciable expense under Section 179 of the tax code. Currently, equipment itself can be treated as a deductible basis, but improving our human capital is just as important to the tax code, and so this would help incentive specialized training as well. The impact that this would have on the jobs, assuming the pilot program could be undertaken in a half a dozen states with appropriate learning institutions, the first year I estimate our growth would be 2,000, and the following year 4,000. If the Section 179 incentive were enacted, I'm really confident that there would be substantial business community interest in this tax adjustment. I'm optimistic that this could spur the growth of jobs for small businesses rapidly, plus keep high-tech manufacturing strong, competitive, and recognized for quality in the U.S. Thank you, and I look forward to continuing to work on this project and with the Small Business Council.
Thanks, Charlie.
Mr. President, I think we've run a little bit over on time. I think you get a sense for the projects we're working on. We were going to have Lou and John give you an update today, but I think we've run over, and we'll find another way to get you an update on those projects.
I'll call them up.
What I would say the next 90 days, we're going to keep doing what you've seen today. three new focus areas. I think infrastructure, we're really trying to get a private financed infrastructure momentum building. So we plan to really focus on infrastructure over the next 90 days. Small business financing and creation, I think that's going to be a key area of focus. And the third is, the country has closed the gap from a cost standpoint versus India and China and other countries around the world from a manufacturing and software standpoint. We're really going to try to reach out broadly and see if there's ways we can get more foreign direct investment, or as importantly, companies to really look at locating key jobs here. So those are the three big thrusts. I think you can get a sense that the team is committed to the task, and we want to build a jobs plan, and we want to make a difference.
Well, look, I am enormously impressed with the presentations that have been made, and I promise you, we are going to act on a range of these recommendations. I think that it's important to note that wisely, the focus of a lot of your recommendations are areas where we can execute, either the private sector can execute on its own or the executive branch can execute on its own. I do think that sends a message to Congress, though. We shouldn't have to work around Congress. They should be part of this process, and it indicates the degree to which, regardless of whatever political camp you're in, there are some common sense ideas that we can all embrace to make ourselves more competitive that should not be subject to the usual political gamesmanship. And this Job Council, I think, is highlighting a whole host of those. So I just want to make sure, Valerie, that this stuff gets to me as quickly as possible. So as soon as you guys have put something together, I want it on my desk. I want the relevant cabinet people to meet with me and figure out how are we implementing as quickly as possible. The last point I'll make, in addition to just saying thank you, is the optimism that's projected around this table, I think, is important. We've gone through a very difficult time over the last couple of years, but every time I look at the data, every time I look at all the formidable challenges that are before us, I'm always struck by the fact that these are all solvable problems. These are not areas where we don't have good ideas, we don't know what to do, and I think that if you look at the reporting that's been out there just over the last week or two, it's important for us not to be Pollyannish. It's important for us not to pretend like we've fully recovered it in the way we need to. There are a lot of people who are still hurting out there. But it's also important to remember we've got enormous assets. We've got everything that's going to be required to make these structural adjustments to ensure that we're competitive. It doesn't require radical changes. It requires just some common sense approaches to problems. And I think the more that those of you around this table in business leadership are pointing that out, that the sky is not falling. The question is, are we going to build on the strengths that we've got, and are we going to eliminate some of the weaknesses that are holding us back? There's no reason why the 21st century can't be the American century just like the 20th century was. And you guys can amplify that probably even more effectively than I can, because when I say it, well, I'm an elected official. I'm a president. He's supposed to say that. So sometimes it may get discounted. But I know this is something that you guys believe in deeply as well. So, Jeff, thanks for your leadership. Great job.
Great, thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks.